Hey, econ students, Mr. Hunter here. Apologize for the voice. I got a little bit of a cold going right now, but we'll see if we can't get through our video here today. This is our first video on Unit 2. This will be on demand. Unit 2 overall will be about demand, supply, looking at how prices are established in a market economy. Really specific focus here today too. We're gonna look at the law of demand and what that means, and then also look at graphically what a change in quantity demanded is. So pretty basic, but also a lot of new information here with this. All right, so let's get the terminology out of the way here. Demand itself is the ability and willingness to buy a product on the part of a consumer. Okay, ability and willingness to buy a product. And we can illustrate this through the demand schedule, which would be like a table, and then the graph itself, which we refer to as the demand curve. And I'll show you those in just a second. Now, the law of demand itself is that price and quantity demanded will always vary inversely from one another. That just means opposite. All right, so if price is going to go up, quantity demand is going to go down. And if price goes down, quantity demanded will go up. And that's always going to be the case. Now, this is what's interesting about this is that one of the few concepts in economics that we actually refer to as a law. We don't get that very often. We have a lot of economic models that are created through this material that try to prove a point and try to predict human behavior in one way or the other, but we just cannot be confident enough to call them a law most of the time because sometimes there's exceptions to that. Now with demand, we don't get many exceptions. All right, we tend to always act as we would expect to act, and you'll see why. It's a pretty basic situation here. Also, I want to make sure on the curves, we can illustrate these either as individual demand curves or we can focus it on an entire market. They're going to look exactly the same, whether we're analyzing one person's decision-making process at different prices or we're looking at an entire economy. It's going to look exactly the same on our graph, just bigger numbers with a market. All right, so let's take a look at the schedule and graph here to start. So this is what a demand schedule would look like. It's just a table, very simple, 2 columns, price and quantity demanded. Now in this particular table, you can see that as our price is going down, the quantity demanded is going up. All right, so the lower the price, the more we're going to be willing to consume, which again makes sense. Inverse relationship, they're going to act opposite to one another, and just common sense. Are you more willing? This one's going to be about pizza. Are you more willing to pay $14 for a pizza or $2 for a pizza? All of us probably will be willing to buy more at $2 than we would at 14. So let's take a look at this graphically. All right, so we always will put price on the vertical axis and then the quantity will be on the horizontal. We always label our graph with our topic. In this case, like I said, it's pizzas. And we have our 4 points labeled on the graph with the blue dots. All right, if we connect those dots together, in this case, we form a straight line. Now, this does not always have to be a straight line. This could vary based on how sensitive are we to the price change. But what is important is that the shape is always going to be downward sloping. All right, we're always going to see that with the demand curve. Okay, so you got to make sure you remember that, and that will be important as we move along. All right, let's look point by point here really quickly. All right, so at $14, we see that we are going to demand 0, which would be shown here at this point. So 0 quantity at about 14 on price. Numbers aren't necessarily exact here. And then at $10, we see that we are consuming 3. So we go over from 10 down to 3. We move along the line here, and we now go to 5, where we see that as we are paying $5 for a pizza, we're going to consume 6. And then finally, at $2, we're going to consume 8 pizzas. All right, so that's our points, and how you get to that. Knowing how to graph that stuff is something you're going to have to be able to do here fairly quickly. Now, looking at these points, I also wanted to make sure you realize that we always need to label our graph. So in the case of this demand curve, we always label I usually put it down at the bottom at the end of the line. Just label it with a D. This is not terribly important right now because clearly this is our demand curve. It's only one line. But as we start showing more shifting and new curves being created and we start adding in a supply curve as well, it is important that we make sure we're labeling that. So we need to get in the habit early for sure. Okay, so that's what a demand curve looks like. If we move on to change in quantity demanded, this is a graphical representation here. So a change represented graphically on a demand curve as movement along the curve. This is always going to be based on price. Now, this is pretty simple. and this is the only thing that can happen. But as we add levels of complication to this, it's going to be something that people are mixing up. All right, so I'm trying to be very clear with it now, and I'll continue to do so. But you have to remember that the only thing that causes movement along the curve is a price change. The only thing. There's going to be other variables that could change demand, and different things will occur. But the only thing that's going to cause movement along the curve is a change in price. Very important to remember that. A couple kind of secondary terminology here, secondary terminology. The income effect is where we're looking at the price changes in a product that we tend to feel richer or poorer because of that. So if the price of something goes down, we feel like we have more money to spend. We might be willing to buy more pizza, or we might be willing to buy a drink with our food instead because we feel richer. All right, so that's the income effect. Now, the substitution effect, on the other hand, looks at where if a price changes, we might be more willing to go another direction because of that. So, for example, if pizzas get more expensive, we might say, "Oh, well, let's not do pizza then. Let's go get tacos instead." So we're more readily able to go and do that if the price goes up on something. All right, so that's substitution effect. Let's get back to a graph here and look at the change in quantity and demand and what that looks like. All right, so again, we've got our same graph here, still focusing on pizzas, and we take a look at this. So let's say the price is $10 for a pizza. Now, we've already shown this once before, so at the price of $10, the quantity demanded is going to be 3. All right, so $10, 3 pizzas will be sold. All right, so that's what our demand curve shows at this point. Now, if we look at a change in quantity demanded, that's all it is. Okay, we have the movement from one point to another. In this case, the price went down from $5. And without even seeing what happened in quantity demand, we should be able to predict it. We should know that if the price is going to go down for something, we are going to see an increase in quantity demanded, because we know this is an inverse relationship and they go against each other. But we have the ability in this standpoint. One of the things that's great about this is you can cheat a little bit. We can look at the graph and get the information that we need from that without even having to memorize the exact part. As long as you can read a graph, you're good on this. All right, so a decrease in price is going to lead to an increase in quantity demanded. If we went back the other direction, we went from $5, raised it to 10, we already can see there that that's going to cause a decrease in quantity demanded. All right. Okay, that's going to wrap us up on this first video of Unit 2. We'll be getting into a bunch of new concepts and building on this as we move through the unit. Have a good one.